like a shark fin. Deepest blue is my hat is like a shark's fin. Deepest blue is my hat is like a shark's fin. Yeah, blue is my hat is like a shark's fin. Deepest blue is my hat is like a shark's fin. Deepest blue is my hat is like a shark's fin. Deepest blue is my hat is like a shark's fin. Man-made terror, hungry jaws of death. Battle across my depths, I'll pause your breath. I caught you to sink down 40,000 leagues, bleeding to death with no arms and short sleeves. My world's deep blue, killers gotta eat too. Looking for human flesh to rip my teeth through. Other fish in the sea, but barracudas ain't equal to a half-human predator created by a needle.
And just like a great white shark, I've never had to evolve. What is up, people? This is the Shark Attack. I am Sean Williams. We got a new show tonight. We got a lot to get done and a lot to cover with what's gone on over this past week in wrestling. So without further ado, people, since, as I said, we got a lot to cover, this is time for a feeding frenzy.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
I've had a lot of time to think about the Hulk Hogan situation. I see both sides of it, and I've heard what a lot of people from the Pope, formerly from TNA, all the way to Titus O'Neil and the New Day have had to say about it. Make no mistake about it, I don't now, nor can I ever condone what Hulk Hogan said. I also think the "I didn't know I was being recorded" excuse has ever worked for anyone. Especially when you're a public figure like Hogan is, and in that situation you should always know that at any point you can be recorded. With that being said, I grew up as a person that believes in things like redemption and second chances. However, I believe in second chances, not third chances, or multiple chances in general. And just because Hogan is getting a second chance doesn't mean that now he can breathe easy. He can't. He still has more work to do to repair the damage to his image. I can only imagine that he doesn't want this to be what defines and destroys his legacy. Who the hell would? Hell, no sane person, that's for damn sure. But now the ball is in Hulk Hogan's court. He has his second chance, and majority are giving him the benefit of the doubt. So I would suggest to him that he makes the most out of it and make this one count, because while he's been reinstated, and there are some who have forgiven him, don't let that have been in vain. Because if that happens, you're not bouncing back from that. Kurt Angle, next topic. Kurt Angle laid out the ultimatum for Brock Lesnar, having had enough of Brock being a champion who won't defend his championship. And why not? Everybody else is tired of it. The ultimatum was that Brock Lesnar show up to Raw and agree to defend the title, or he would no longer be the Universal Champion, as Kurt Angle would strip him of the title. So, lo and behold, we go to Monday, and Paul Heyman shows up with no Brock. Typical. And he comes out to talk Kurt Angle out of stripping Brock Lesnar of the title, which Kurt said he would only let Brock keep the belt if he agreed that at SummerSlam he will show up and he will defend it, or he will be stripped of the belt, which Heyman did agree. So now, which by the way, following the events of Raw, it's going to be Bobby Lashley and Roman Reigns. The winner faces Brock Lesnar at SummerSlam. And this is also a rematch of the same match that the Extreme Rules crowd just completely dumped on the entire time, but more on that later in the show. Now, let me say this about Brock Lesnar. I never liked the idea of Brock holding the belt. Then again, I didn't like it when Goldberg won it earlier in the year, or earlier last year either. Why? Because the last full-time champion that we had was Kevin Owens. And the game is different, and this is a different era where a part-timer holding the world title doesn't work anymore. Hogan never defended the title on Wrestling Challenge or Superstars of Wrestling, that much is true. But he didn't even appear on most of them unless it was for interview segments. But at least he did show up for things like Saturday night's main event or the main event when it wasn't a Saturday. And he even competed on those. Brock barely shows up anymore, and it's a waste. And it's an insult to those that are on the main roster and are busting their tail off to be at the top level. And they don't have a main title to work for because the champ is too gutless to even show up for it. And it comes down to this. Brock Lesnar has no drive and has no passion for this business. The only drive that and passion that Brock Lesnar has is for Brock Lesnar. And I've said this time in and time out. Championships are meant to be won and defended. It doesn't get simpler than that. One way or another, the reign of the Beast incarnate is going to come to an end. It doesn't matter if it's Roman Reigns or Bobby Lashley, or even if Brock somehow retains over one of those two, or both of them if they make it a triple threat. It doesn't matter because, as I said, one way or the other, one of those three is going to get these hands and have to contend with the monster among men, Braun Strowman. And because I'm calling it right now, he will cash in his Money in the Bank briefcase, and whether it's at SummerSlam or the Raw after SummerSlam. Whether it's that, like I said, whether it's the pay-per-view or whether it's on Raw, the Beast is going to be slain, and we will witness the rising of a monster. And people, that is the feeding frenzy for the night. So, that being said, let's move on to the next segment. It's time for my mic drop.
Let the battle commence!
You know, I gotta say this, that I've been critical over most of the NXT call-ups. One of them being Andrade, Cien Almas, and Selena Vega. But I gotta say, that match that he had with AJ Styles on SmackDown this week was fantastic. It reminded me of how skilled he is, and why Selena Vega just seems to fit perfectly with him. And it reminded me of the Almas that we saw when he won the NXT title from Drew McIntyre, and he held on to it for quite a while before losing it to Aleister Black. Now, you just have to give him feuds and give him some competition. And if you do that, I can promise you, we'll get more matches like that out of him. I mean, even the match he had with Sin Cara wasn't too bad at Extreme Rules. But you know what? That just shows how good he is. If a guy who, let's face it, nobody really cares that much or thinks Sin Cara is really going to go anywhere past where he is right now. But if Almas can make a match like that look good, there's no telling how much skill that guy's got. Now, I gotta say that while it was anything but Extreme Rules wasn't a bad pay-per-view. I mean, I gotta say, the B team winning the Raw tag titles from the Deleters of Worlds, Matt Hardy and Bray Wyatt, didn't see that coming. And while Asuka didn't win, James Ellsworth did get his ass handed to him by the Empress of Tomorrow. And frankly, seeing James Ellsworth get his ass kicked 10 ways from Sunday is about the only entertainment that he really has in him. Which, side note, I found out reports are James Ellsworth is not under a WWE contract. So my guess, it's a paid by appearance thing. I'm guessing it's so they can pull the plug on him at any point, and that they don't have to commit to him with anything, because let's face it, outside of being an annoyance and getting his tail whipped by, well, the women on SmackDown, that's all he's good for. Elsewhere with Extreme Rules, Shinsuke Nakamura got some gold, thank God, winning the US title from Jeff Hardy. Now, that was a match that he needed to win, and really, Jeff Hardy doesn't need the US title, so losing that belt doesn't hurt him at all. And, gotta say, seeing Randy Orton return was also something we didn't really see coming, and seeing him return as a heel and being back to the sadistic SOB that he used to be, that's definitely money. And I'm curious to see how that feud pans out. Bobby Lashley and Roman Reigns got crapped on, but saw that coming, but more on that later, but this was also a match that Bobby Lashley had to win, as a loss was not going to hurt Roman Reigns, but I still haven't recovered from how bad it's been for Bobby Lashley up to this point, i.e., the Lashley Sisters segment and everything with Sami Zayn. And while I want him to be the one to face Brock just because it's something new, it doesn't mean I think he's at that level yet. I mean, Bobby Lashley still has a ways to go, and he's not even close right now. And lastly, you had one hell of a match with Seth Rollins and Dolph Ziggler. I mean, both are amazing talents. And I really don't think that there's a bad match in either one of those two. Ziggler retained, which leaves me curious as to what's next for the both of them. I mean, you can't have these guys fight forever. But I definitely think that as long as Dolph Ziggler is holding the Intercontinental title, and many of us have wondered, when is Drew McIntyre going to split away from Dolph? As long as Dolph's got the Intercontinental belt, that's not happening anytime soon. And people, that's my mic drop for the week. Alright, that being said, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back after this, so people, don't go anywhere.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, this is Brian H. Waters, and you're listening to The Shark Attack with Sean Williams.
Shout out to my good friend Brian H. Waters. Make sure you check out his show on Podbean, Break It Down with Brian H. Some just grade A classic wrestling knowledge right there. And of course, make sure you check out him and the real deal Dwayne Allen on the Wrestling Realm, both on Facebook and on YouTube. It's as good as wrestling talk as you'll find anywhere else. And they're good friends of mine. And, oh yeah, recently approved by Eric Bischoff because of their tribute to the NWO, which definitely is worth checking out, so make sure you guys watch that. Now, that being said, we've tackled a lot of the good. Now it's time to go into some of the bad. This is where I like to call it, question authority.
Who's in charge over there? This is aggravating me now. What, I can't count on you people?
That crowd at Extreme Rules was terrible. They sucked. I knew they were going to be dumping on the Roman Reigns Bobby Lashley match, and they did just that with the chants of Rusev Day, We Want Beach Balls, CM Punk, and Boring during the match. That was to be expected, but to do your stupid countdown chants during the Iron Man match between Ziggler and Rollins? Serious, are you marks never happy? First off, the chants of CM Punk are just sad, tragic, and pathetic, and stupid as hell. You're making a martyr out of a guy who quit. There was no special occasion for this. There was no doing this to support a cause. He quit. He's not coming back, no matter how many times you chant his name, because he's been too busy making a fool out of himself in UFC. You guys are the reason that the higher-ups in the WWE think that the wrestling fans, and whether it's in person or over the internet, why they think we're a bunch of morons. All you guys are doing is ruining it for the rest of us and just wasting your own time and energy. So I would suggest this to you guys, is that you can either stop watching and stop buying the tickets and going to the shows. Otherwise, as I said, the only time you're wasting is your own. So either hit the bricks, or if you're going to watch it, sit down, shut up, and to those marks I will also add, bite me. Next topic is, there is nobody who is more lost in the shuffle than Finn Balor and Bobby Roode. Balor seems to have retired the demon, which has definitely become a problem. He's not fighting over any titles and doesn't have any feuds really going on, and no, I didn't forget about the Baron Corbin match that he had at the pay-per-view. And then there's Bobby Roode. It seems like going to Raw has just seemed to be a failed experiment. You thought that with Roode challenging Dolph that Roode would win and we'd have our next challenger for Dolph Ziggler. Nope. Didn't happen, as Dolph beat him. I don't know how you fix Finn at this point, but you need to either turn Bobby Roode from face to heel or send him back to SmackDown, because he's sure as hell not getting anything done on Raw. I mean, I thought you had something when you had Finn with Gallows and Anderson and reformed Balor Club, but now you're back to, he's just simply there. So, now what do you do? I don't know, but because I'm not a creative, I'm not a writer, but WWE needs to figure it out. Alright, that being said, debuted it last week, kind of going to do it again, though some tweaks to it and kind of an explanation of what this next segment's about. It's time for the cast-off. Now, part of why I introduced this segment was to give my own take on certain past moments from wrestling that may come to my attention from the rest of the podcast world. And there was one that did stand out that I felt like I needed to give my own 2 cents on. And that was, of course, the purchase of WCW. Now, I remembered watching Raw, kind of the, dual production, however the heck you want to call it, when Raw and Nitro had Vince on both shows, and it was announced that he had purchased WCW. Now, at first I thought, wow, the WWE just bought another wrestling promotion. They bought their rival. So, you would think that when it was bought by Vince, that this would be some big company purchase, and they spent a good deal on it. Apparently not. While listening to Something to Wrestle With, I had learned that I had heard that Vince, he bought WCW, but he only bought it for $2 million, which ironically enough was the same amount that WCW settled with the WWE on when WWE sued them over Scott Hall and Kevin Nash when they debuted on Nitro. Their settlement, what WCW paid them, was $2 million. So in a way, there was kind of payback or poetic justice on Vince's part, because he knew that WCW was in a tight spot, thanks to the AOL Time Warner deal. TBS and TNT basically pulled the plug on them. They had no other networks really chomping at the bit to get them. So they had no choice but to take whatever Vince was going to offer. But here's the thing. We thought that this was going to be the same WCW that had been butting heads with the WWE for years and at one point was beating WWE. What we didn't consider was that when Vince bought WCW, he didn't buy the WCW that we remembered as being that strong. He bought the one that was a tattered mess. He basically bought like a whole promotion full of table scraps. And how do I mean this? Or what do I mean by that? They had absolutely zero star power going for them. Don't believe me? Then let me ask you this. Did they have Sting? Did they have Luger? Did they have Flair? Did they have Hogan? Did they have Hall and Nash? Did they have the Outsiders? Did they have Rey Mysterio? And no, I'm not talking about later on. I'm talking about in the beginning. Did they have any of those guys? It's a big, fat no. In fact, from what I was hearing is that the total number of contracts that WWE had gotten, 24. And that's not including the other guys that they looked at them and just said, forget it, you're canned. Don't believe me? Look what happened to Jeff Jarrett. Vince fired him on air. But no, guys like Shane Douglas, Hacksaw, or Bam Bam Bigelow, or Sid, or Macho Man. Macho Man and Goldberg were two different... Macho Man was a completely different situation. Bret, of course, wasn't coming back. Macho Man wasn't coming back. Goldberg wasn't coming back. Or coming to WWE, since he hadn't been there at the first time at that time. But basically, you had nothing. Who'd you have? Mike Sanders? Lance Storm? Mike Awesome? Sean Stasiak? Mark Jindrak, Sean O'Hare, Chuck Palumbo. Really? That you're gonna call that star power? Please. It even took them a bit before they even got Booker T. And then you had that infamously horrible match between him and Buff Bagwell, which was just awful. The crowd was chanting boring, and you made that the main event. You also had Scott Hudson and Arn Anderson doing commentary, which, all due respect to Double A, now we know why you never did commentary. I mean, and then they wanted to complain about, oh, the ring wasn't as bigger than what we had in WCW. Suck it up. And, I think the point that Bruce Pritchard had made on Something to Wrestle was actually made sense, in the sense that they were not used to a place that had structure. I mean, for the longest time, WCW was basically letting their guys get away with bloody murder. It was basically the inmates running the entire asylum. But, here's the other thing on what went wrong when they got WCW, and maybe at the time the plan was to start a second promotion run that was WWE owned, but people had already deemed WCW a dead brand, and those that watched WWE, the majority of them were were WWE loyalists, and were never going to welcome an outside promotion coming into the mix. As far as they were concerned, WCW didn't exist to them. Maybe they would sample every now and then, but if it push came to shove, they would still pick WWE in a heartbeat. And a lot of the guys that did come around were given horrible gimmicks. Horrible gimmicks that didn't work. Don't believe me? Look at DDP. His stalker gimmick, where he was targeting the Undertaker's at that time wife, Sarah. And when that didn't work, then you had him with the goofy grin and doing this motivational speaker thing. And that was even worse. Hell, TNA did a better job when they got DDP. And that felt more like the DDP of old that got him over. And if you need another example, what about Chronic? Brian Adams, Brian Clark, when they took on the Brothers of Destruction, and in the most abysmal tag team match. They got one shot, and after that, they were canned almost immediately after the pay-per-view was over. I mean, neither Adams or Clark had it in them, whether it was the rust or they were just not that good, and even Taker and Kane couldn't make miracles. And the day that whole invasion angle ended, might as well have been a mercy killing. And if you listened really, really carefully, I'm pretty sure you could hear everybody in the world saying, thank God, when that invasion angle came to an end. Needless to say, it was a day that definitely changed the game, but it also proves that how good competition can truly be, because in terms of the quality, WWE hasn't been able to meet that same quality since the Monday Night Wars ended. And I'm not saying I'm wanting a repeat of the Monday Night Wars, but the fact is that without competition, we have no real reason to give the most effort or take that effort to another level. And we learn that day in and day out with WWE. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is my cast-off moment. So with that being said, we're getting nearing the end here. It is time for, well, of course, the segment dedicated to you guys, and as well as throwing in my own wrestling knowledge, as well as including your own. This is From the Mouth of the Shark.
Smile, you son of a bitch!
Alright, so I added a couple of polls this week. One was in regarding to something else I was hearing on other podcasts, was talking about WrestleMania 9 when they held it at Caesar's Palace, and it was an outdoor arena. And also when they almost did WrestleMania 7 at the Los Angeles Memorial Coliseum, which for those that live in California know, if you got the sun beaming down on you, that place is a pressure cooker because you got no shade whatsoever. So, the poll question that I asked for this one was, do outdoor WrestleManias suck? And 3-1 on this one voted that yes, they do suck, because frankly, the crowd is miserable, you got bad lighting, or any effects that you usually require a darker area. That doesn't end up working, as proven with a couple years ago when they did it in San Jose, and Bray Wyatt was carrying the lantern around, but it was still light out, so really, that whole effect meant absolutely nothing. So, that was that poll. This one happens to be tied, which comes from another, from listening to Tony Schiavone's podcast, who personally I feel like, as a commentator, he was underrated. And the question I asked was the War Games match from Wrestle War 1991 between the Four Horsemen versus the Steiners, Flying Brian, and Sting the best War Games match ever? We actually had a tie on that one, 2 apiece. I mean, not only do I remember that one and thinking that was one hell of a War Games match, and I don't think any other War Games match has been able to live up to it, but also is the fact that I remember when Sid Vicious did the powerbomb on Brian Pillman, and Brian Pillman's feet hit the ceiling and because of that, he didn't really land right when Sid did the powerbomb, and I'm pretty sure at one point he hit his head on the ceiling, which I thought, even though that was WCW in its infancy, you're really going to tell me that that they couldn't afford to raise the ceiling in the cage a little bit higher so their guys wouldn't be hitting their heads on the stupid thing? So, that's my take on that one. And the next one I asked was, could Scott Steiner have made it in singles as the old Scott Steiner from the Steiner Brothers era and not as Big Papa Pump? 2-1 on this one voted yes. To me, I felt like the wrestling ability was in Scott Steiner during that era. Big Papa Pump was just loud and juiced up and bulkier than the Scott Steiner we remember, and he just was not that good as an in-ring technician when that happened. And the next question I asked, and Stephanie McMahon apparently is going to have some major announcement on Raw. Some are speculating there should be a Divas Tag title, which I asked, should there be a Divas Tag title? 3-2 on this one say no, which included myself. I personally don't think there should be one, just because there are enough there are enough championship belts as is, and WWE seems to have a hard time keeping track of all of them. So for that reason, I'm saying no. And yeah, I know it feels like we're hinting at that with the whole Bayley and Sasha thing, which I don't know what the hell they're doing with that one. And the other poll question I asked was who was the worst big man in wrestling that you've seen? Between the Great Khali, Reese, aka the Yeti, or Giant Gonzalez / El Gigante. Nothing is going to be worse than Giant Gonzalez to me. Have you tried watching a match with him? It's not pleasant. Look at the match at WrestleMania 9 between him and Taker. Taker is still pissed at himself over that match. Plus, who could remember that? Who could forget that stupid costume? Although I guarantee you a lot of people wish they could. And one more poll question that I actually asked in the group this week. Make sure you check out the Shark Attack group on Facebook. But I also asked, who did you like more of these two stables between the NWO and D-Generation X? 3-1 ended up going to D-Generation X. Let me tell you why I voted for DX, it's because I was more entertained by them than I was with the NWO. Not saying that, not putting down the NWO. I'm just saying that DX, they stayed with just about the same cluster of people for the most part, while the NWO got to the point where it was one of those clubs where just about anybody could get in. I mean, when you had Hall and Nash, and then you added the Giant, and then you added X-Pac, aka Six, okay, that was one thing, but then you started adding Buff Bagwell, Scott Norton, Masahiro Chono, the Great Muta, Big Bubba Rogers, VK Wall Street, Kurt Hennig, and then Bryan Adams, Stevie Ray. You basically turned it into, you just added a revolving door to the NWO. At least DX kept it limited. The most we saw was 4 guys when you had it as Triple H, X-Pac, and the Outlaws. But majority of the time you saw it was Shawn and Triple H, and they made it work. I mean, even their last run I thought was entertaining as hell, whether it was taking on Miz and Morrison, or when they hijacked the broadcast truck and fixed it so that whenever I'm sorry, I forget the name of Umaga's manager, Armando Alejandro Estrada, whenever he tried to speak and you heard a loud belching noise. So, I went by the memory factor. That's why I picked DX over that one, over the NWO. And of course, also had a question from my good friend Patrick, who asked, how long do you see Drew McIntyre sticking around with Dolph Ziggler? You know, like I said, as long as Dolph Ziggler's got the Intercontinental title, I don't see Drew parting ways from him anytime soon. Unless you make it that the Intercontinental belt is the reason they break up because Drew wants a shot at it. Now make no mistake, Drew is a different cat than he was in his first WWE run. He's in better shape than he was. He's added more moves to his repertoire. He can definitely talk on the microphone. And no chosen one thing here, but he is definitely money. And I guarantee at some point, whether it's the WWE title or the Universal title, we will be seeing that with Drew McIntyre. So with that being said, people, we're going to wrap things up tonight. I want to thank you again for listening. Make sure you check out my other show, Variety Bites. I'll have the new episode for that coming up. Of course, check out my Facebook group, The Shark Attack, as well as Variety Bites. You'll get a lot of my takes on wrestling, and of course, anything else in entertainment going on right now. That being said, I want to thank you guys again for listening. This has been The Shark Attack. I am Sean Williams, and people, I am out of here. Good night now.